ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ welcome Sangat ji to our Thursday Q&A session. So again, thank you to Susan Benji's kindness for collating some of the questions from the WhatsApp group and the link that she sent. So we've got quite a lot of questions, so we're going to jump straight into them. So Anji Darshan Benji, so the first couple of questions are related to Dragon, so I'm just going to share the slide from the last session so we can see clearly. Just let me know if you can see that. Anji. So the question is, there's two questions quite similar. Is there a difference between Satogun, Jotapad, and Turiya Avastha? And I've heard and read that when the Dragun are untied, then the fourth state, Jotapad, is attained via the Dasandawar. But in the last session, it says they're at the same level. So confused if Jotapad is higher state, then Tamo, Rajo, Sato all the same.
Hanji. So the Dragun consist of the Sato, the Rajo, and the Tamo. And when the mind is within those three states, it is connected to material realm. Now, the whole point of the meditation, the Simran practice, is to take the mind above the realm of Dragon, so above the realm of thought. Because what happens is that when the mind connects, when the Surti connects to the Shabad, the Gurmantar, the mind that was previously immersed in thoughts, whether they're good thoughts, like Satoguni thoughts, whether they're Rajoguni thoughts, or whether they're Tamoguni thoughts, the mind is immersed in that material realm. But when the mind does the Simran, and it goes into a state of no thought, the state of Sun, that's when it crosses over that Bhavsagar, that ocean, that material realm, that Maya, that barrier that is between the mind and Paramatma. So yes, Satogun and Turyapad are different, completely different. But the reason why the path of love is from Rajo to Sato and beyond, actually that line should be going beyond Satogun into fourth state. Because when we do the Simran, the mind starts to change. So a mind that sits down to do Simran that's immersed in Rajo Tamogun, as we do the Simran, the mind will change to more Satoguni. It's a higher vibration state. It's a more sukham state. So in terms of how we've talked about that, the mind needs to, in order to experience spiritual realm, Dasam Dwar, Jotapad, Sun said, it needs to clear away those layers of man. It needs to become more sukham, more energy, more high vibration. And so as we do the Simran, slowly, the mind becomes more Satoguni. It becomes more high vibration if it's not already. But then that's not enough for us to experience that Jotapad. That's not enough for us to experience mukti or salvation, or experience that state of sehaj and anandan bliss. If the mind is simply Satoguni and doesn't manage to cross over into that spiritual realm, we still come back into Juna. We're still bound by the material realm. And what will happen is that if the mind is Satoguni, within that material realm, within that circle, those sponge still have power. So they will pull the mind out of Satogun to Rajogun to Tamogun. And so the mind just spends its time within that circle, and it's not able to escape. And so when the mind does Simran, it goes into that Jotapad, that fourth state, and that's where it can experience Paramatma. And that's why that even if we spend a life doing good actions, religious actions, charitable actions, we can't experience mukti. The only way is through bhajan bandagi, is through Simran. It says in Gurbani, Kaho Nanak eho tat bichara bid har bhajan nahi shutakara. It doesn't matter what you do, like in terms of religious actions, giving donations, all of those things, we can't access Paramatma through those things. So that was a really long explanation, but I hope it makes some sense, and any questions are welcome.
Angie, also feel free to unmute yourself if you need any clarity or if you want to ask any questions as well. So there is another question I'm going to ask you to answer again, Benji. So there was a bit of a long 5-part question, so I'm just going to kind of ask you to summarize. You mentioned before about if your last thought, for example, is on Tamogun, you might come back as a creature under the earth or something towards those ends. So the questions are, if you get reincarnated into those kind of creatures, birds, sea animals, under the earth, do you have any chance of being reincarnated as human? And have we had human lives before? And how do we move along that ladder, that Santaka Marg from Rajo Sato to Jotapad?
So again, the questions that you're asking, I'm only going to be able to have a limited answer to that because and we'll be drawing from my limited experience and also from my understanding of Gurbani. So there's going to be people who can answer these questions in more depth, but I'll give you my limited understanding of it. And in Gurbani, it says that we have been through many, many, many lifetimes. So, Kei Janam pe Ekit Patanga, Kei Janam Gajmeen Kuranga, Kei Janam Pankhi Sarpahoyo, Kei Janam Haver Brickjoyo, Ehe Jagdish Milan Ki Bariya, Chiran Kal Ehe De Sanjariya. That Guruji is reflecting on all of the many, many thousands upon lifetimes that they've been animals or birds, and that this human life is the highest life form that you can have because it's the only life form within which you can connect to Paramatma. But all along those lifetimes, we collect little bits of Nam. Whenever the mind has come into a state of presence, even in those lifetimes that we've been animals or birds or vegetation or whatever, we collect little bits of Nam. And in Gurbani, it's called Parchun. So in those in those lifetimes, we collect those little bits of wealth, Namtan. And when that reaches a certain amount or accumulates enough, then we get that human life. We get to have this human life form. So I've forgotten what the question was.
Anji, so that's explaining that. And then how do we move from Rajo Sato and then back to Jotapad?
Yeah. So walking that path of love is exactly that. So the path of Prem Bhakti. And the path of Prem Bhakti is that developing that loving remembrance with Paramatma, that loving relationship. And the first step towards doing that is the Simran, is because the mind is so fragmented in the Rajo, in the Tamo, in the Sato, that Gurbani says that a fragmented mind cannot connect to Paramatma because Paramatma can only be found when the mind is hazir. So there's a shabd that Benji talks about, which is Tukadam Karari Jo Karo Hazir Hazur Khudai. That Hazur, Paramatma, is in the presence, is only attainable in the present. So the mind, in order to come out of that dragon, has to become single-minded. And when we do the Simran, the mind then goes from Tamo, which is the lowest vibration state, to Rajogun, and slowly from Rajo to Sato. And it's not something that we need to be aware of or conscious of because we don't want to be focusing on the thoughts. But you may have already found that sometimes when we sit and do the Simran, if we've felt very Tamoguni, angry or very lustful or felt a lot of hatred towards somebody, simply doing the Simran, connecting the Surti to the Shabad, lifts our mind out of that state. And so this is exactly what the Gurbani says about the path out of Dragon, which is as we do the Simran, we experience salvation from those, we experience mukti, we cross over that Bhav Sagar. Gurbani says, Surta Shabad Bhav Sagar Tariye. The Bhav Sagar is this ocean of Dragon, is these thoughts. And when you connect the Surti with the Shabad, that's how you cross over. So we can try, sometimes we try to be more Satoguni so that we can, be closer to Paramatma. And we can, that's a very good intention, to have that, to want to do more religious actions, to think about all of the good things that we want to do. But what Gurbani explains is that until the mind is not free of thought, it's not going to be able to cross over. Vichar mare tare tare ulta joon na ave. So even those well-intentioned efforts, they are still positive and they still are higher vibration, closer to Paramatma, but we have to actually cross over. We have to do the Simran until we go into Sun, that state where the mind leaves the physical body, the mind leaves the Pavan, the Pawn. And when the mind leaves that, then the mind crosses over. So the simple answer to your question is through the Simran.
Thank you. So related to that, Ben, I think it's a Benji, someone's asking on the chat is what happens when, so they're doing the Simran, but then they start to feel anxious about going into that sun state, into that thoughtless, that void. So what can you say to help someone who's feeling anxious about that and how to overcome it?
Yeah. So definitely, like when we're doing this Simran, we're going on this spiritual journey. It's a very different, maybe for many of us feels very unfamiliar because the mind has spent so many janams for so many jugs on the material realm or on the material path, on that path of thought. And it's during that time, its friendship has been with those sponge. So there's a kind of familiarity and a sense of kind of predictability or, with that path, the material path. So when the mind starts to try and walk on that spiritual path, those so the sponge are going to be trying to pull it back, and so all kinds of thoughts and emotions are going to be coming up. So fear might be one of them, guilt, shame might be, all those kinds of any feeling, anger, whatever is inside of us, whatever we've been rehearsing for all those lifetimes, is not just going to be kind of dissolved immediately. It's going to take time, and going into that void can feel very unfamiliar, and there can when we're going into that space, it's an unknown. We've not been there before. We sometimes end up establishing a feeling of comfort or safety from having lots of thoughts and those emotions that even though they're negative, like anxiety or fear or anger or guilt, we're so used to having a kind of friendship with them that it feels scary, or it feels like, well, if I'm not this person, then who am I? And it's the unknown that sometimes then pulls us back into our old personality. And there's a guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he says that when you start to feel a sense of uncertainty or this feeling of being in an unknown or this unfamiliar place, then actually you're crossing that river of change. You're stepping into a new identity. And what we know from Gurbani is that is our true identity, that the identity that was created by the Panj was the false identity. But because we've spent all those lifetimes with that identity and piling on more and more layers upon that false identity, we feel like it's our true state. And so what I would advise for that is that this is part of the work, that when we're sitting down and that feeling of anxiety comes, or those difficult emotions come, or the difficult thoughts come, this is where we teach the mind, holly holly, with pyar, to sit back down and to keep on doing the work, no matter what comes up within the system. And it can really help to talk about it with others, like you're doing here, talk about it within the Sangat, and doing Simran in Sangat, and all of that will help to keep us on that path into the unknown. Thank you.
Angie, amazing. So yeah, I would just echo that, the more sangat that you have, it's like a new restaurant opening. And if everybody's talking about that restaurant, even if you've never tried that food, you have that jar to want to go and try it. I know that's a very small example compared to this, but as you keep the company of the Gurmukhs, of the Sad Sangat, and you realize that this is true, that this, that we get that sense of transformation, letting go of our conflicts, of our limitations, as we start to go into this space, then we'll have that jar, we'll have that enthusiasm, that motivation to want to do it. And there's one way to make something that's unfamiliar more familiar, and that's by doing it. So no one's saying you have to sit there for 3 hours without any practice and go straight into that state. Just, a lot of this is also about learning to relax. So when we're doing the Simran, we're always saying, relax your body. So if you're going into from that state of stress, then it's going to be difficult to go beyond that. So it's just remembering that Guru Mere Sang Sada Hai Naale, that Vaiguru's always with us. Vaiguruji's guiding us on this path. So that's where this Gurbani, maybe taking a Hukamnama every day, or just reading what is the Hukamnama from the Bar Sahib, we're able to create that relationship with Guru Sahib. And as we start to learn that Guru's all loving, Guru's all present, they're always with us, and we start to trust that as well. So we have that gyan, and then we're doing the effort, we're coming into Sangat, we're talking about it. That gives us that honsala, that reassurance that we're walking on that path, on the right path. Hanji. So there's a question about uh, what is Prakash exactly and how is it experienced? Do you see or hear something?
Amandeep.
So, Hanji, so it's confusing in the sense, it's confusing in the sense that we say that Maharaj is without form, without color, without sound. So in that sense, what we're saying when we're talking about Anhad Shabad is it's not an external sound, it's not an external light, it's not like what we know. It's happening internally, it's beyond form. So in terms of Prakash, it's nothing of this world. So if I say it's light, we might think, oh, it's just like a bright light, but it's more than that. It's like having a full body experience, but without your body, a full sensory experience without your senses. So there's a merger, it's hard to describe it. It's brightness, it's ecstatic, it's anand, all of the things that Maharaj is talking about. So that's Prakash. You might not necessarily hear Shabad at that point, but you will hear Shabad leading up to that point. But I think what the key in terms of that experience is there is no you to experience it. There's complete merger, there's complete union. तू करता तू हुआ मुझ में रहा ना हूँ जब आपा पर का मिट गया जित देखो तत तू. So by saying you, va guru, vai guru, we merge with that Paramatma, with that Vaiguru, with that Nirgun Sarup that is beyond form, and nothing remains of ourselves. And so that's why we say Akat Kahani, Akat Katha it's beyond words, and it can only really be experienced. Maharaj kende gunge ki mithiyai. It's like, how do I explain to someone what a strawberry tastes like? Unless you've tasted a strawberry, I can say it's sweet, I can say it's tangy, but we can't quite explain what that strawberry tastes like. So doing a really bad job of explaining that. Moving swiftly on. So we had a question in WhatsApp about can we, and it's been answered quite well, but just if there's anything you want to add about can we do Simran on our own if we don't have the Sad Sangat, the physical Sangat around us, can we still get to that state of Malap to meet Vaheguru?
Yeah. So what keeps coming up in the Gurbani is continually is when we connect our consciousness with those elevated souls, then we progress spiritually. And there's so many shabads, Sad Sangat ke Asare, Prabhasyo Rangalai, like with the asra of those saints, we learn how to love Paramatma, and then there's shabads that say Pucho Santa Mero Thakur Kaisa, that that I ask those saints, those beloveds that have experienced Paramatma, what is my beloved like, you know? And so, you know, um, I think initially, prior to walking on this path of Simran, I was a very introvert and felt that my relationship with my guru was very private and it was just between me and guru. And whatever I directly got from Tantan Sri Granth Sahib Ji was everything. And I still believe that that's the primary relationship with guru and then with Paramatma. But as we started going on this path of Simran and started to do Sangat with elevated souls and even with each other, as we started to do the Simran, our own vibration started to lift. And then when we would be in each other's company or do Simran together, the the experience and the extent, the point to which the mind can be taken is much further than when I'm sitting on my own doing the Simran. So the more that I've experienced doing Simran in Sangat or doing Vichar with elevated souls, and seeing the impact it's had on my vibration, I'm now convinced that, the physical Sangat is crucial. And what somebody was saying that they don't have physical Sangat. And the more that we start to elevate our consciousness, vibration, the more that the Sangat appears in front of us, somehow, some tarika, by some way, we will find the Sangat will come to us. And in Gurbani, it says that there's a Shabad that says that, when my karam kind of came to fruition, all my pichle karam, then I met that Purak, that being, Betyo Purak Rasak Bairagi, that Bairagi, that beloved that was in love with Paramatma, so, when we do the Simran and we have that yearning, then we will find elevated souls appear from nowhere,
So literally, a couple of anecdotes when we was first coming into Sikhi, I'd go into the Gurdwara, not speak to anybody. I had thousands of questions. And it didn't feel like I had any sangat. So I did ask once, how do you find that sangat? And there were two really amazing answers that came. One was you have to start to become that sangat to find that sangat. So Benji's mentioned a lot of times this word vibration, which, not technically not a good Bani word, but, we can all understand that is when you start to walk on that path. If you want to find Sangat that does Simran, do the Simran, because then your thoughts, your man will become engrossed in that search for Paramatma, doing that Simran, that Gurbani. Then your bachan, your words will be about Guru. Then your actions. So Maharaj kente man bach karam. So all three of those things will then become about Simran, about Guru. And as you're talking about that, you'll notice that you'll find those people around you who will pick up on that. They'll want to be around you. The other one is do that ardas, and it's happened so many times in my own life where I've done that ardas for sangat or I've done that ardas for true sangat, and be very specific because jo mange thakur apne ke soi deve. So I just asked for sangat and I got Sikhi sangat, and then I had to ask specifically, I want that true sangat who are really walking on that path of darshan milap, not just, doing the kind of the physical ritual aspect. And Maharaj will provide that. So when Darshan Benji and some of us started to do this Simran in Sangat, we started to walk on this path. The other Sangat, you can find these videos on YouTube, you can find the Gatha, we've got this as well. You can join online and that all helps as well. But we wanted someone, or we wanted that Sangat that could guide us Briki Nal in detail, answer our specific questions. So we did our own internal aradas to that. We would find that kind of Sangat. And then, I don't know if it was a week later or a month later, somebody showed up by Deputy Singh from Punjab, showed up at our local Gurdwara and was doing this katha. And we started to ask them questions and they started to answer them. And it was mind blowing that, we literally just did this ardas and this Gurmukh shows up from nowhere, right? And we've had that connection ever since. So the other thing is prioritizing it, if it's truly what we want to continue on this path. So if you live outside of a place that has a gurdwara, like I said, you can do the YouTube Sangat, but maybe once a week, maybe once a month, you'll come to that gurdwara where they're doing this kind of Sangat. There's loads of Sangat that, as Benji mentioned, in Canada. So we will be having camps in the UK in July with by Deputy Singh as well. We'll a bunch of us will be going to Canada as well. There's camps that happen in India, and we will take out a week or two to go to India to do Simran in that Sadh Sangat with those elevated souls, because it helps us to just advance quite a lot. Maaf karna, we're having some work done on the house, so if there's some weird noises, that's what it is. Well, I agree. So it's a bit like, when we talk about Gurbani, we say the Guru's was Jyoti Jyot Samay. It's like a candle lighting a candle. Now, when we don't have Sangat, it's like someone saying to you, start a fire, light your light, but no one's given you a match. No one's taught you how to start a fire from scratch. When you're doing Sangat of people who are walking this path, Waheguru, you might get matches along the way, but when you do the Sangat of a true Gurumukh, of a Brahmgyani, not meaning someone who's knowledgeable about Waheguru, but is having that experience, that darshan, that prakash, that milap themselves, then just by being in their company, just by their dristi, because their jyot is alive, it's awakened, just by being in their company, it will have a positive effect on you. Again, Mafi for the background noises. Hopefully you can still hear me. Darshan Benji has disappeared as well. Anji. So next question. When we say during Antargat Simran, draw your attention to the belly button. What do we mean by that? Should we visualize the belly button, or should we focus on the tummy in during inhale and tummy out during exhale? So Hanji, so we don't need to visualize anything. So just like now, if you were to close your eyes and I were to say, feel where your big toe is, you'd be able to do that. So maybe you moved your big toe this time, but if I now ask you to feel where your big toe is without moving it, you would have a sense of where it is. So in the same way, when we're doing that Simran out loud, we're pulling the belly button in slightly, that nabbi in, and then we're pulling it out. So when we go antargat, when we go quiet, we're doing the same thing. We're just putting our attention on that place. We're not visualizing it. We don't necessarily have to be moving it. We're just putting our attention on it. Just like you'd put your attention on your big toe now, you can do it, or the tip of your nose. You can put your attention on that nabbi. If you're not sure, move it first, and then start to sense where it is. And the more we practice, the more we progress with that. So somebody's saying, I'm unable to pace while chanting. When I chant a little faster, I can hear myself, but the unpleasant thoughts don't come. But when I chant slowly, to hear myself, the unpleasant thoughts do rush in. So, Hanji, that's why we always recommend at the beginning, always try to do the Simran either loud or fast or both. So, what happens is because of our habit, our habitual mind, those thoughts are going to keep coming in until we awaken the mind. So, Maharaj kende, simar, simar, simar guru apna, soya man jagai. Our mind is asleep within thoughts. So it's not that we're physically asleep. Our mind is asleep when we're thinking about the past, the future, the judgment, the fear. That means our mind is asleep. It's not experiencing its own joy. It's not experiencing Paramatma. So in order, the Maharaj has given us a really simple technique which is kut kut man kasavatti lai. So we beat that mind with the Shabad. And this is just an initial stage. I know there's a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with it, but it's just a technique to start to kill those thoughts. So you might notice that as you speak louder, as you chant faster, you don't have an opportunity for those thoughts to come in. So we'll do that for a little while. And so what I would say is do that long enough. Don't worry so much. About so obviously we do want to listen to the sound of our voice, but at the beginning, if you're having a lot of vichar, just try and chant to the point where you're having less and less thoughts. Then as you slow down, once you've done it fast and quick to begin with and your thoughts are slowing down, then you can start to tune more into the sound of your voice. And now obviously if you've practiced that for a while, you don't necessarily have to chant loud and quickly. You can just start to chant slowly and tune into the sound of your voice much quicker. So there's stages how we can do this. So hopefully that makes sense. So I know that we should only pray and ask for Naam, but even though I don't ask for anything else explicitly, my mind still asks for a lot of things without my mouth uttering it. How to unconsciously ask for Naam. So again, it's the same jukti. Like we're so blessed, Sad Sangat Ji, that Maharaji has not made this complicated. They've given us the same technique for everything, basically, and it just varies a little bit according to what stage we're at. You know, we don't have to go stand on one foot in a river. We don't have to go live in a cave or go to Tirat or go on yatra anywhere. It's the internal yatra. So if our mind is still asking for other things other than Naam, you don't have to guilt or shame yourself or blame yourself about that. All that means is that we're still just having those vichar. We're just on that path. Santaka marg taram ki pauri, that state of Rajagun, where we're having those wishes, hopes, desires. We're moving towards Satagun. So the fact that you're doing the Simran in the first place, that's a huge bonus. That's amazing. But what starts to happen is the more you're consistent with your Simran, the more you're doing that chord, you're making that relationship with Guru Sahib through the Gurbani, through the Sad Sangat, is you'll start to experience it for yourself. And I always say, everything that I asked Maharaj for in this physical world, they've given it to me, only for me to realize that that was not what I was looking for. So you can ask for the car, you can ask for the relationship, you can ask for the holiday, whatever it is, the job, the child. And sometimes Maharaj will give you those things. And it's only then that you realize that is not what's going to fulfill me. It's actually that naam, that is that book, that desire, that hunger that is going to fulfill me. And so, if you're going to ask anywhere, obviously ask Maharaj. But as you continue to have those experiences where it's not fulfilling you, or have the experiences where you're doing the Simran, your mind is in conflict, your mind is in desire, and then you've done the Simran, and suddenly you feel content. Deho naam santokiya, uttare man ki puk. The more you start to have that experience where you feel content, you feel peace in the Simran, the more you realize that this is real and this is what is actually going to give me the peace that I need. Hanji. So when doing Antargat Simran, it seems like something in my throat is moving and whisper comes from there. Vaiguru, the way it's settled is saying Vaiguru multiple times on breath out and then the same on breath in. Is that correct? So I'm not sure, I'm not clear on what that question is. So it sounds like you're kind of doing it Antargat. So generally, when we're doing Antargat Simran, you don't have to do it with the breath. You can just be chanting it fast, inwardly, or slowly. However much you need to chant to keep your mind internal, to keep your mind focused, you can do that. So sometimes for me at the beginning, I found it easier with the breath. So I would inhale Vai, and I would exhale Guru. For some people, when they're doing dhyan in particular, or they're stopping, they feel like they need to chant quickly to keep their mind focused. So what if that is happening naturally for you and it's keeping your mind ekagar, it's keeping your mind focused, it's keeping your mind steady, then that's fine. Like we said before, this is just the first stage where we do the Simran out loud, we chant Vaheguru internally, but it's just a stage. As we start to go into Sun, we will hear that internal sound. We might hear multiple internal sounds, and then we're going to start to put our attention on that. So as long as it's keeping your mind focused, then you can focus on it. But at some point, we're going to go beyond the body. So we're not going to be focusing on the sound of our voice. We're not going to be focusing on the nabbi. We're not going to be focusing on our throat. These are just ways to anchor our mind initially, and then we will go beyond that. Anji. So sitting in dhyan on navel, why do we not chant Vaheguru? What if the mind is still chanting without body part moving? Feels like the breath is disturbing, and I feel like I want to hold my breath to focus. Please clarify. So that's brilliant. So again, what I would recommend is if you're very new to Simran, you might not be able to sit in dhyan. So what we mean by dhyan is where you're not chanting externally, you're not chanting internally, you're just sitting and you're focusing either on the nabbi, on the belly button, or just here in front of your face. It's very difficult to do if you haven't practiced it. So that's why we don't chant it, is the previous answer, is because we want to start to let go of anything in the physical form, because even the shabad is a sound that's external. So when we start to sit in dhyan, we want to even let go of that, because what we're trying to do in dhyan is listen to the anhad shabad. Can you still hear me? Or are the sounds too distracting? You can still hear? Angie, awesome, thank you. So if I break it down, first, we're listening to the sound of our voice. We're bringing our attention to the nabbi, because that's one of the places where the Shabad becomes pargat, it becomes manifest. So when we're and then antargat is we're taking away from the physical form of chanting, we're chanting in our mind, so we've come even closer to that jot that's in our mind. And then when we get to the nabbi and we're sitting in dhyan, we're not chanting because now we're listening to the Shabad. The fact that you don't want to breathe at that point is really good. I mean that in a positive way. It's not that you're going to stop breathing, but when you hold the breath slightly, that helps you to keep that focus on the nabbi and to hear that Shabad. So it's not that you stop breathing altogether. You can hold the breath, which is as much as is comfortable. And then you're listening to that for that internal sound. And of course, you might not know what it sounds like, but as you start hearing it, you can start to ask the Sangat, is this what I'm listening to? It's not coming from outside. It's not coming from within your body. You will hear it with your ears, but it's not coming from within your ears, if that makes sense. So it's okay for you to hold your breath at that point, just as much as is comfortable. Obviously, don't pass out. Bad joke, sorry. So when we try to spend dedicated time in Simran, to clarify, we start with loud, Hanji. Then we go Antargat, which is chanting with your mind, Hanji. And then you can go into Dhyan, which is focusing on that belly button or in front of your face, Hanji. If we want to spend longer, can we just start that cycle again? Where should we aim to spend the most time to progress? So again, it depends on your avastha, what your stage is, how long you've been doing it. So as an example, initially when we were doing it, we would spend a lot of time chanting out loud. Because if you don't spend a lot of time initially chanting out loud and your mind's all over the place and you try to go antargat or you try to do dhyan and go quiet, your mind the bunch will trick you and it'll take you back into vichar, it will take you back into thoughts. So if you want to, Hanji, you can do those cycles. You can do, say, 15 minutes chanting out loud. You can do a couple of minutes antargat and then do dhyan. But if you're still not able to connect, what we were doing initially, just to give an idea, is we started by 20, 40, 60, to the point where we were doing an hour and a half out loud, and then we were slowing it down. And then we were doing half an hour where we were going internal. And that is just initially because we're trying to clear that mail that has accumulated for lifetimes. Bahut janam vichare the madho, a janam tumhare lekhe. For so many lifetimes, we've been accumulating these hopes, wishes, desires, judgments, fears. So it's going to take time for even just this lifetime, however old you are. We've never actually learned how to focus properly. What we've been taught, most of us, is by thinking we solve our problems. So we're constantly analyzing, we're constantly thinking. So if you imagine that mind has been unrestrained for however old you are, at least, and Gurbani tells us for all those Pishale Janam, our mind has been unrestrained. Think how hard it is to now keep that mind in focus. So it's going to take that minute, it's going to take that effort, it's going to take that practice initially. And of course, we don't know what anybody's avastha is. You might be one of those gurmukhs who have done a lot of bhakti in your previous janam, or who might be very satoguni in this janam, and you might find that you connect really quickly. But people like myself, we had to do a lot of the effort initially, a lot of that chanting, bringing the mind back again and again and again, doing that dhyan out loud until that mind was willing, that mind had been purified. Pariye mat papa ke sang oh tope nave ke rang. Till that naam started to purify this mind enough that it could sit still, that it could go antargat, that it could sit in dhyan. So you kind of need to check it for yourself. But I would say if you're having a lot of vichar, do it loud and fast as much as you can to start with, then start chanting slowly, then bring it into antargat, and then bring it into dhyan, and just see what cycle works for you. Hanji. So when is the navel slightly drawn in during Simran, and is that on the inhale? So Hanji. So we say Va, and pull the belly button in. So a lot of people struggle inhaling while they're saying Va and pulling the belly button in. So what we normally say is don't worry about where the inhale is happening. Just pull the belly button in as you're saying Va, and as you're saying Guru, you can exhale them because that's easier. What starts to happen is automatically you'll notice, and maybe you won't even notice, but automatically as you're saying Va, at some point that inhale will happen, and as you're saying Guru, the exhale will happen. And then what happens is that bone, that breath starts to uda sutolan banjada, it starts to balance out. So we haven't covered this yet. We will cover it in the future. It's quite deep and complicated to talk about now. But as Benji mentioned in previous sessions, we've connected to this breath as we've come into the physical world. And if our breath is not in balance, if we're too much on tamoguni side, where we're having too many tamoguni, angry vichar, we'll have more heat in our body. So it's a cycle. Maybe you have too much heat in your body and then you're having too many tamoguni vichar, or maybe you're having too many vichar and then you're creating heat. So one thing that Gurmukhs have taught us is you can just put your hand in front of your nostrils, and you might be able to notice that one of your nostrils is stronger than the other. So the breath is maybe stronger coming out or in on the left or the right. And that's normally an indication. So the right is more tamoguni. That's that Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ankar, more of that heat. Raju is on the left. So that's more of those desires. So as we're doing that Simran, we're saying Va, Guru, we're inhaling, we're exhaling. That will start to balance that breath out. We'll come more into Satoguni. And as we come more into Satoguni and that breath balances out, it's only then that we can start to go beyond Satoguni into that Jotapad that Benji was talking about. So Benji's much better at reciting the Gurbani, memorizing the Gurbani. So I'll ask her if she's got time to post up some Gurbani Panktiyan about the breath. It's also linked to Ida Pingala Sukhmana, which are the nadis within the body. So Maharaj doesn't spend too much time on talking about these nadiyan within the body, these subtle channels within the body. Maharaj doesn't spend too much time talking about the chakra system, for example, the chakra within our body. They do mention it, but we don't want to get too engrossed in those things. So just like that discussion we were having on WhatsApp about Rajagun, Tamagun, Satagun, what the Simran does is the Simran helps you to transcend all of that. So you don't need to worry too much about it. We do need to focus on that technique because that will help us to balance that breath, balance our vichar, and to go into Jotapad, into the Dasam Dwar. But we don't need to get caught up in, which one am I in, which am I not in, and kind of all of the I don't want to do ninda jugli of any dharam, but kind of the yogic, the Vedic kind of things where there's a lot of emphasis on that. Maharaji again is giving us a very simple technique of the Simran. So yes, you can research into it, you can know it, but knowing it alone is not going to help you to transcend it. The practical Simran is going to help us to transcend it. And if we do want to do Khoj of it to understand it, let's use Gurbani as our base for that. So you can search up in whatever app you have, Sikhi to the max, there's other apps available. And you can search up even in English some of those words. So like chakras or Bingala, and you can see what Maharaji is saying about those things there, and then you can contemplate that or ask questions. When doing Simran within, is that sun, and how long should we listen to the sound? So when we're chanting Vaheguru in our man, that's not sun yet. So that's just preparation to tika the mind, to settle the mind. Sun is when we're sitting in dhyan or when we feel like we've gone into this sleep-like state. So either you will feel like you've actually just fallen asleep, but you weren't having many thoughts as you went into that state. Or ideally, you will be in that sleep-like state, that void state, and you might even be awake within that. So that is what sun sound, that's what the sun avastha is. And you might hear Shabad there, but you might hear Shabad before that, and you might be listening to it. How long should you listen to the sound? Listen to the sound until you go into sun, or as long as possible. But there is one caveat. You don't want to be listening to the Shabad unless you've done that Simran first. And the reason for that is if you imagine you're standing there and there's one person pulling you forward and there's one person pulling you back, you're going to be torn. So if our mind is trying to focus on the Anhad Shabad, the internal Shabad, and we're still having thoughts about the external, we're going to lose that sultolan. That balance is going to become unstable, and our mind can also become unstable. So that's a very big caveat. That's a very big warning. Do not try to sit in dhyan. Do not try to just sit and listen to the Shabad unless you've done some Simran first and you feel like your mind is settled, because that can imbalance the mind. So always do that Simran out loud, do the Simran Antargat, and then once you know that I've got very little vichar or no vichar at all, then listen to the sound of the Shabad. So I'm just aware of time. Oh, brilliant. It is the last page. So these are questions that were answered in WhatsApp. So if they've already answered, if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, they can. Otherwise, I'll just kind of summarize what's in there. Waheguru. Hanji.
Sorry, Benji. I wanted to quickly ask a question. Like, whenever I'm doing like Simran, sometimes like obviously my dhyan goes like other places. I don't know
Ji.
what to do because of that.
Hanji. So, like we were saying earlier, that's what the Banshur will do. They'll put lots of thoughts into our mind. Sometimes they can be really horrible thoughts. Sometimes they're just day-to-day thoughts. That's the job of those Banshur of Gal, of Maya that we talked about, and that happens to everybody when they're starting. So don't feel like, oh, is it just me? Is there something wrong with me? We all think that at the beginning. It's just because the mind has been unrestrained. So what we do about that is, so there's one thing, I have this saying that I stole from someone, which is practice makes progress. When you were learning to drive a car, probably, and no offense against you, you were probably terrible at it the first time, right? But as we continue to do that practice, now you can probably drive without even thinking about it. So in the same way, the more consistent we are with the Simran, we set that time aside every day or a couple of times a day, what will happen is holy, we'll get better at bringing our mind back. So the reason why we say chant loud or chant fast to begin with, and it's not always possible to chant loud, especially if you're getting up really early, the whole family's there, you don't want to wake them up, but you might want to chant fast. So that's one way. If you're chanting really fast, it's hard for those thoughts to come in. And let's say day one, you do that, and half a second, your mind pays attention to what you're doing. You continue. By the end of the week, maybe your mind pays 1 second attention, but by the end of a month, you might get 5 seconds where you're able to bring that mind back. So just kind of Western analogies that I can give you is the mind is like a muscle, right? So if you go to the gym, you can't run a marathon. You can't pick up the heaviest weight straight away. What you do is you'll start slowly and that you'll build that muscle within your body. In the same way, the mind can be like that muscle. So you'll have that thought, whatever it is, and you bring your mind back to the sound of the Shabad, back to the sound of your own voice. So you're chanting, Why, Guru, this thought comes up about the future. Soon as you notice that thought has come up, you bring the mind back. Why, Guru. Then another thought comes up. It might be about the past. It might be a judgment. It might be a fear. You bring the mind back. And that feels like a lot of effort at the beginning, but what you're doing is building that muscle of the mind. So another thing that I would say is it does not matter at the beginning how many vichar, how many thoughts you've had in however long, let's say 20 minutes. It doesn't matter how many thoughts you've had. What matters is how many times were you able to realize and bring it back. That's what's going to work for you, is bringing it back, bringing it back. And then over that practice, what you'll find is it's much easier to start bringing it back again and again. Does that answer the question, Vijay?
Anji, thank you.
Anji,
Anji.
brilliant. So another thing I would say is don't get attached to what that thought is. The Panch Jod are very clever. They'll put the most ridiculous, horrible, most judgmental thoughts into your mind. Maybe even past trauma will come up. And that happened with me, things from the past that I'd buried deep down came up, or thoughts that I would, that were horrible that I would never imagine that I would have would come up. And that's just a distraction. So don't start to inspect, why am I having that thought? Or why did this trauma happen to me? Or what does it mean? Because then we've become attached to Maya again. We've become attached to that vichar. And that's the very thing that we were meant to be letting go of. The only thing that's important in that moment is to recognize that that's the Panch Jod or Maya, however you want to think of it, and to let go of it. And this is all a process of letting go. Aap gavaiye, ta shoh paiye. You have to let go of yourself. What is yourself made of? It's made of your name. Koi nao na jane mera. So we let go of our name. It's made of our body. We let go of our tan. Tan man tan sab sop gur ko hukam maniye. Right? So we let go of the content of our mind, we let go of the thoughts, we let go of the body, we let go of our self-identity. In that moment, while you're doing the Simran, you become no one, no thing, nowhere, no time. That's something that Joe Dispenza says, which correlates with Gurbani. So it's about main nahi, prab sab kich tera. We become nobody in that moment. So the Panch will come in, simply let go. Don't inspect the thought. Don't catch that train of that thought of where it will take you, because it won't take you anywhere good. Even if it's a sataguni vichar, even if it's a thought that seems like it's a good thought, at some point even that good thought will take you down a dark alley. So you might be thinking, oh wow, I'm so blessed. While you're doing the Simran, you might be thinking, oh, I'm so blessed. I've got Sad Sangat finally. And then what the Panch Jod will do will be like, yeah, because I don't talk to my older friends anymore. So it's good I've got this Sangat. And then you'll go into the story of why you don't talk to your old friends anymore. This person said this to me. That person did that to me. And next thing you know, that 20 minutes is over and we haven't made any progress in the Simran because we didn't let go of that thought. Maybe that happens to you, but now you realize next time you're much quicker to let go of that thought. Anji, so I think there was a question here. So I always try to do Simran when kids aren't around, so there's no external noise or distraction as I'm very new. Just wondering if you can get to the place with more practice to do Simran when there are external distractions. Last week mentioned not to have anyone touch you whilst doing Simran. Simran is external noise. Hanji, so Darsha Beji would be really good to answer this because she has 4 children, very busy household. 2 of them are very, very young. So I'm with you. At the beginning, I felt the same way. I used to get so annoyed if my husband walked into the room or my children walked in. And at the beginning, we feel like we need that complete silence, that complete quiet. But the fact is, the world is busy, the world is distracting. So, we can't expect when we go out into the world that someone's not going to say something negative towards us. And it's our responsibility to not react to that. So, this was a question that came up in a session. How do we not react to that? The Simran gives us the opportunity to practice that. The thought comes up, or the external noise happens, or someone distracts us on the outside. It's our responsibility to acknowledge that happened and then bring our man, our dhyan, back to the Simran again and again. And I would say even pala, it's even good if you've got lots of distractions and you're able to teach your mind to come back to the Simran, back to the Shabad again and again. That's really positive, because then it means when you're out in the world and someone sends you that text message, something unexpected happens, you'll have built that muscle even stronger, that you're able to come back again and again. So hopefully I answered the question. Forgive me if I didn't. So last question. I still don't really understand exactly what the Anhad Shabad sounds like. Hanji, so it's a very good question, because it's very, again, just like the Prakash question, it's very difficult to answer. People will have different experiences. So Gurbani in different places talks about Panch Shabad. They talk about, these different kind of instrument sounds that you might hear. So some of them are like a drum beating, a wind instrument, cymbals, and there's a couple more that I can't remember right now. So for some people, depending on what their state, what their avastha is, they might hear different sounds. So some of the sounds that the Sangha that we're in have heard is, it might sound like crickets, like there's crickets chirping. It might sound like, initially, it might sound like that. It might sound like the ocean, like a wavy sound, like a white noise sound. It might sound like a tinnitus sound. It might sound like a doo, or it might sound like a dee. I know, I feel very silly doing that. So those are some of the sounds that you might hear. Ultimately, it's a single Shabad that you will hear. When you hear that single Shabad, you will know that you are hearing it, and you will know that that is it. But on that journey, as you come closer, so we gave in one of the sessions an analogy of Darbar Sahib. So if you're outside of Darbar Sahib at Amritsar, you won't be able to hear the kirtan clearly. It will sound very fuzzy, but you'll know there's kirtan happening. You hear the odd tabla beat, you'll hear a voice, you'll hear the vajja. As you come closer and closer, that sound becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. And as you're walking down Darshan Diori, and then you enter the Darbar, then it's really clear. In the same way, as we're doing the Simran, as the man is getting clearer and clearer, we will start to hear that single sound. It's the single Shabad. Ek Shabad, mere prana basta hai, bahar janam na ava. It's that one Shabad, but depending on your state, and how close you are, or how much mer there is on the mind, that will make it dependent on what you're hearing. If you're in doubt and you are hearing in something, then please feel free to message us on WhatsApp. You can privately message us as well, and you can ask. The other thing I would suggest, I've plugged it already, is that we're having these camps across the UK throughout July. So I think we've got Scotland, we've got Bradford, we've got Warsaw, we've got Slough. So if you want to attend one of those camps, there'll be an opportunity there to ask Sangat, to ask Baisab, Baisab's wife as well, or very high avastha gurmukhs. And what I want to say about how you know someone is a gurmukh is watch them carefully, right? See what they say. Does it align with what Gurbani is saying? Do their actions and their words align with that? Never just decide because I've said someone's a gurmukh that they're a gurmukh. Decide for yourself, right? But decide based on that bhakti within yourself and within them. So we're going to finish the session here. Thank you so much, Sangat ji, for attending. And we'll be back again on Sunday. If I made any mistakes, Pulchuk maaf karni. Say ਪਿਆਰਿਆਂ ਮੇਲ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਚਿਤ ਆਵੇ ਨਾਨਕ ਨਾਮ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਪਾਣੇ ਸਰਬਤਾ ਭਲਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ